All right, awesome. Well, I'm super excited for this roundtable. I'm like always excited for the roundtables, but when we're talking about something as big as this is it was this list of all stars. This is pretty great. So I'm gonna jump right into it. 2025 top mobile gaming trends. Pretty important stuff. We've got some. We're gonna go over. We'll send this PDF out if you DM me on LinkedIn or not, and we're obviously gonna post the recording as well. And we're gonna jump right into it pretty quick. So, uh, why don't we kind of real quick? I think everyone kind of knows all of you guys, so maybe like one sentence. Cody, you want to just kick it off, and then we'll just go down the list, um, and then we'll jump right into your guys' trends.
Sure. I'm Cody. I'm a game design director at EA, creative director, game design leader on in the mobile side of EA.
Awesome.
Cool. So I'm Ariel. I'm in Playtika for 3.5 years almost. I'm head of competitive intelligence. I lead all of the efforts of competitive intelligence in Playtika, and I deal with basically everything that our competitors do: product, monetization, sometimes economy, and market trends, of course. So, and market strategy. It's nice to meet you all.
Oscar.
So I'm Oscar. I am long in the tooth, as I'm sure you can tell by the whiteness of my beard. I've done everything in terms of mobile console, PC gaming in some form in terms of live ops. Probably most usefully as I wrote the book Games as a Service 10 years ago, and I've just finished writing a book called Playing with Balance, which is coming out in March.
And
Should I
Shane
go?
is may join us later, but not if
Okay.
something come up.
So I'm Joseph Kim. I am part of a mobile game studio working on a mobile extraction shooter, dating simulation game, and I am an AI maximalist.
Yeah. Yeah, we're excited to hear all that in the next roundtable. Was that a dating? Was there, did you just say dating?
Yeah. So
All
we're gonna
right.
hard launch that game in a week or so. So look out for Heart's Desire. That'll be hard launching in about a week. But it's for the Indian audience, but it'll be available globally. But if you wanna date in India in a simulated full motion video way, then check it out.
Awesome. Wow. Big announcement here. All right. Well, like I said, I was gonna jump into we were gonna do ours first, but it's gonna be in here and that's no fun. So we're gonna just jump into what you guys think were the 2025 trends. I just put the names of the people here because I didn't really have anything, I didn't have slides prepared. I don't want to call on anyone. I know Joseph, you're never has shy of talking.
Oh, so should I talk about the biggest trend? Well, I think for me, the biggest trend, and I think there was I think there was a report that talked about it from Liquid and Grit, but like a specific thing that I thought was super exciting was Delta Force versus PUBG last year. And basically, the way that so Delta Force had less than 20x the DAO, but they beat PUBG in revenue by like 60 or 70% over 3 to 4 days. And they did that by one, integrating like an esports event and then layering it was 3 or 4 different events associated with that. And so, um, you know, I think the biggest trend for me was layering different kinds of events to really drive live ops to like, extreme scenarios like that. So when you're when you're over 20x less DAO and you can 6 to 7x revenue, I think that was for me the most shocking thing of last year.
Yeah, we do have a slide on layering live ops in particularly in I think casino, but integrated live ops is a big thing.
Massive.
Yeah.
Not that I'm biased or anything.
Anyone else?
I can think on a few topics that were remarkable this year. There are obviously a lot, but I think we can talk about two main um, maybe growth channels. First of all, we are talking about IP collaborations, intellectual property, a lot of collaborations all around. We see it in different genres, of course, Monopoly Go. We can all see that with Harry Potter and Marvel, and also we saw it in Stumble Guys. Stumble Guys are doing it always, but more and more. And of course, direct to consumer, the D2C, it was crazy, and just the recent changes in the regulation just brought some explosion in this area. A lot of revenue from different games and publishers that getting in. There are more, but those were.
But just as they drag you in with that, they kind of pull you back, because of course we're still seeing this whole situation about signposting. Now I saw a recent thing about Apple now maybe going to get back the chance to be able to charge a quote unquote reasonable fee, which previously was thrown out effectively and now isn't. And then you've got the European Digital Markets Act, which is still being discussed. Plus, of course, you've got the Digital Fairness Act that's coming up, where we're risking massive problems with the way that they're potentially interpreting currency, which is going to really throw the cat amongst the pigeons. I think there's some really dangerous stuff because of overreach, because we failed as an industry to communicate that we're doing the right thing by the consumer. We haven't shared data about what we've done effectively, and we've got a lot of consumer groups who are coming for us. And I don't want to be doom and gloom, but that is absolutely worrying for me. And I think that sign, the trend for 25 for me for that is this increasing language from regulators that they are going to come down hard on us. We've seen it in the UK with the Online Safety Act, which is a disastrous process, not because not because we don't want to protect kids, but because A, it doesn't protect kids in reality, and B, we're actually creating situations which makes it more difficult for people to engage without any extra value. It's like cookies, but infinitely more complicated. And I'm not going to carry on with the doom and gloom. I will throw in a couple of more positive things I think are worth chucking in trend wise. I'm old, and as I say, I've seen it, done it, been there. And again, don't take me too strong on that. But seeing the return of integrated marketing. Now, as somebody who was the evangelist for Unity Ads back in the original of that, when direct marketing suddenly became massively powerful, I'm actually delighted we're now seeing that we need to start seeing the benefit of having beats which are commonly shared across multiple channels and effectively delivered. And that has become not just a possible, but a necessity. As we've seen, volume doesn't count for naff all. It's long-term value that's the only thing that counts. And that need to think about the player experience as a long journey, from the acquisition to the conversion to the sustaining. And that is why I think we've seen such massive impact from live ops. But anyway, that's me rambling on.
Hey, Oscar, I just wanted to follow up on your point about integrated marketing, but I don't know if people remember or are aware, but there was a seminal YouTube video that was posted by I forgot his name, but the former Kabam guy, Jeff Howell, I think.
That rings a bell. Yeah. That sounds right.
And so they had a concept, and it's so weird because I think Google took down his video, which is actually unfortunate because it was such an important video. And there was a concept from that video called 360 degree CRM. And I think the vision of what they were trying to do kind of speaks to what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
But also on top of that, and again, not to keep tooting the AI horn, but like we were talking about AI before we started the call,
you're gonna do it.
So much of that vision that was very difficult to do when that video was initially published, like I don't know, like 10 years ago, is now possible. So I think what you're speaking about definitely was something that worked in the past. It was just a massive heavy lift, and now it's so easy to do with AI.
So much easier. And especially if you actually sit back and think about if you think about your player as a life cycle, if you think about your player's journey,
Yep.
Well, we want to get them to discover what we're doing. We want them to learn how the game fits into their routine. We want to know how we can get them to engage. And if we're
Yeah.
lucky, we can get them to super engage. We've got to remember to keep re-engaging them. And if we lose them, how do we resurrect them? That's a whole pipeline. That's a way of thinking, which is system thinking. And
Yeah.
if we don't integrate the game, the community, the streamers, the ads, the like you say, the way that we're going to communicate in a consistent way is absolutely potentially empowered by use of AI.
Yeah. I have a bunch of trends I could talk about, Brett, but I don't want to,
Well, yeah, I was curious what you mean by integrated marketing before we move on. Just
Oh,
like,
okay. So like one way to think about that is like you think about when you engage with your player, what is every single player touch point? From email to the website to in-app notifications to everything, to forums, to everything where you're actually engaging with the player about your game. And it was very difficult back. So kind of the idea is like you want to take a holistic picture on how you message and interact with your player. And back then, it was very difficult to have that 360-degree view. That somebody, one of your players is actually posting about your game in a forum, or you've sent them this email and they've engaged with it, and tying that back to in-game behavior and who that player actually is and how much they've spent. People were like, so there was a lot of initiatives to get that to work in the past. And I think if you had a lot of money and resources, you could have a better picture of that. But it was a very heavy lift. Today, it's so much easier. So I
The
think we're
thing
going to
I'd
see.
add to that, I just
Oh
want to
yeah,
add a little
please,
thing to
Oscar.
that. So, I mean, one of the things that was so difficult for understanding integrated marketing is direct marketing is so measurable. It's so clearly measurable. I do this thing, I spend this much money, I get this return. But with the fuzziness that happened post-COVID, with the privacy regulations and all the other kind of costs and implications and the sheer amounts of budget being spent by certain parties, it's made it much more complicated to be able to get that cost of, well, that kind of return on advertising spend. But what we lost in that process was the value of brand building. What we lost is that, like like I was talking about with this integration with the player experience. And the thing that I think I've seen in the last few years, the guys who really understand that are building all of their messages into their seasonality. They're kind of whatever their seasonal cadence is, they're making sure that their Halloween event is foreshadowed. It's got activities, it's got meaningful reasons to engage. It's giving powerful levers for the streamers who are showing off that experience to their players. And then the response when those players come back into the game means that they get to acquire the things that they've had foreshadowed to them in a way that's meaningful in play. And that level of integration of them, the reason we want the game, because we want to play a great game, is connected with the ways that we communicate across every single channel.
Right. And I think just from like an AI and learning perspective, like you don't want to be siloed in terms of the data that you're getting about your player. So what you want to do is you want to just collect data across every touch point in one place rather than treating those things separately, right? So that's a simple way to think about it.
100%. 100%.
But also I just like that Jeffrey Howell Kabam Regulars video. My understanding is that video was the whole basis of how Scopely developed their whole live ops infrastructure, is my understanding. Rumor, the word on the street, but like so I highly recommend if you can find that video, like all the stuff that they were talking about from way back then, like all of it is it's gold. Like all the things that that Jeffrey Howe was talking about back then.
that's awesome.
I've got a lot of additional trends, but
Yeah.
let me.
Someone else jump in.
I
Joseph,
think
jump
just
at the bit.
just to kind of plus one some of the threads that are being laid here. Like I think something from last year, something that's continuing into this year is going to be just keeping player interest in the game. And so like I think that manifests in a lot of the ways that we were just talking about, and then also like on the actual like game specific side of things as well. Like, and there's some of the liquid and grit stuff also speaks to this, but like different ways of playing, alternate game modes, genre expansion, all of those things I think are just going to continue to get increasingly important to like increase the type of audience that players or that games are getting. Um, having games kind of be like a one-stop shop of like there's no reason to explore anything else. Like you have everything you need here. I think we're going to see a bigger play against something like that this year.
Yeah, we have a whole slide on that, Cody. I know you were if you want me to go to that, but game modes is certainly in core particular was a big trend for 2025.
I've got a trend that that started to take off towards the end of last year, but I think is going to continue and become more important this year, which is the rise of slop and signal to noise. Basically meaning there was a chart that I recently shared with some folks that showed the number of App Store submissions. And basically since AI, at least on the app side, it's been going like this. And it's basically going to go parabolic soon, right? Because and for the audience here, I showed some of the other hosts here a website that I vibe coded in like 2.5 days, and I think like game development is dramatically more difficult and probably going to be the last type of kind of software to develop using AI just because of a lot of difficulties. But like here in Silicon Valley, nobody codes anymore, right? And everybody's using AI for any web or SaaS-based business. AI is like almost automatic and it's so easy to develop stuff, but we're going to see an acceleration of that. And I'm already seeing more and more people, especially since Opus 4.5, start to like develop games using AI. And I think that's going to accelerate dramatically this year, which then means that, and this speaks to some of the to some of the trends that were noted in some of the Liquid and Grit reports from 2025, but like all of these different ways of marketing are going to become important because there's going to be so much noise. There's going to be a billion apps, and the cost of software is essentially going to, well, it's trending to zero. It won't be zero because there's operating costs and there's other costs, but it's going to be so cheap that there's going to be so much noise. So then the question then becomes, how do you break through when there's so much noise?
But I think
Basically,
adding to
there's
that,
sorry.
go
Yeah,
for it.
don't you think we're already at that point? I mean, even before AI, I mean, it
No,
was
no,
like
but
how
but
many
but
apps were getting launched in
I
a
mean
single
I could
day.
I could share the graph with you, Brett, but like that trend was kind of going like this. But I think in this year, because you still can't use AI to make great games right now, like you can make some shitty 2D games that kind of work, but soon, and especially with like agent swarms and other things that are happening and more visual stuff, like I think it like this is a year it's just gonna like go parabolic. So so yeah, the trend started last year. This year it's gonna go nuts with a Z.
And I just saw a note from Alex in the chat, and I think the comment he's made there about the number of 5K installs is an all-time low, and the top is occupied by old games with very deep live ops. I think that's absolutely the case. I think it actually is kind of the response to what Joseph you're talking about, which is we need something that we trust, that we understand, that we know will give us a good experience, and that is why live ops based experiences are so sought after. I think the Newzoo data on PC gaming we're talking about, I think last year or year before or whatever it was, about 12% of players' time was spent in new games, which
Yep.
demonstrates just the level of depth that's being spent in older games. So we already knew acquisition was hard. We already knew that new games were going to be incredibly difficult to get out there. And on top of that, the level of trust has been reduced. As Joseph, you say, the exponential slop level that we're dealing with is there. But one of the maybe the counter arguments, maybe one of the positives there is that those things are still very difficult to sustain in terms of code's integrity over time. Because if you're going to adapt and tinker and change, we're going to find increasing friction when it comes to sort of bugs problems and so on and so forth. In my opinion, I might be wrong, but my
Yeah, yeah. No,
opinion is that's going to happen.
I agree with you, Oscar, with a little bit of nuance there is like I think
Yeah,
this in particular affects new, right? New studio, new game. It's
yeah,
going to be dramatically more difficult for you because the signal to noise like that issue is related to the concept of the attention economy, right?
yeah,
Because essentially, how do you get a player's attention? We've got a lot of live operated existing games that's already sucking in a player's attention. How do you get them off of, you know, um, an existing game, whether it's like League of Legends or Fortnite or whatever? But also you've got video on demand. Also you've got social media. All of these things are vying for that player's attention.
yeah.
And on top of that, the cost of content, especially with AI, is dropping by 100x, 1000x, 10,000x. Everything's going towards free. So then if you're new, what do you do? That's
Well,
going to be
this is
the
where I
main
think it's
challenge of this
interesting.
year.
I think this is where an interesting kind of counter reaction to this. I joke that I think we're going to see more folk bands starting, and I mean this kind of like semi-seriously because if you think about a folk band is an authentic thing where a bunch of people with a bunch of real instruments with no kind of synthesizers, no computers involved, and the people who want to listen to it are absolutely seeking authenticity and trust. I think we'll have an equivalent of that. I'm not saying it's going to take over, it's not going to replace the biggest games, but I think if you're going to have a new game coming in, the way I would do it is to lean into authenticity, trust, and long-term sustainable ideas. Now, I think that's also going to probably end up with us. Maybe at last we start seeing brands actually taking games seriously because we're going to need brands. I think we're going to need trusted brands to be
Yep.
able to separate because at least a brand has some IP protection.
Yeah, if Supercell launches a new game, everyone will still try it. But yeah, so they have
Yeah.
a massive advantage in this kind of existing
But where's the
like
I mean,
climate.
I'm not serious, but where's the Burberry game? Where's the Gucci game? Or Nike game? Those, they've always failed because they've always been rubbish. But if we're dealing with a sea of how do I know who to trust, perhaps an established brand might be a way to go.
I must say that when I'm thinking of the top games that now are leading the top list of top grossing games, you see not always, but in most of the cases, those games that already have their player basis, those senior players that they pay more, and as part of that, they have more budget for marketing. They can deal with CPI. So those are two challenges that new games, especially new studios, they cannot deal directly because they just need to earn the trust of their players. They have to make them senior players and they have to earn their money and to grow. But it's interesting to see that if you, for example, you take the top 100 games in the US, you can see that every year there are more and more games that getting in, but there are some others that getting out. So it's really, really hard to stay in the list. So if you reach into it, it might be for a brief moment, like 1 year or something, and then you get out because you have this race to take a player and make him senior player and make him to pay more in order to grow. So I think this is one of the challenges for new games. Even if they have a great look and feel, like Royal Match style on all of those Turkish games, like Magic Sword, for example, they have great look and feel. They have great gameplay, great core, but you have to, to make your player to earn his trust, and in order to grow, you need to make his engagement higher through those live ops. You have got you don't have a lot of time to do that because in 1 year you might find yourself out of the list. But yeah, this is a challenge. Those senior players, big senior games. This is something that new studios have to deal with. Yeah,
Hey,
it's a
Aaron,
real
maybe I could
challenge.
also like just underscore one of the points you made, but I think that the point about capital should be emphasized, right? Because in this environment of high noise and where there's the attention economy, capital becomes a weapon. Not only capital, but capital and intelligence. Intelligence around what is your like predictive LTV and the ability to extend paybacks and understanding that you're going to be profitable in the end. Like that is a dramatic weapon, and that's just going to be increasingly more important in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, and it's getting harder. It's getting harder.
Yeah, and honestly, I prefer panels that are more contentious, but I kind of like wish we would argue a little bit more here. But
Wow.
I'm
Oh, we'll
definitely
get there.
agreeing with
Well,
you
I
guys.
say the counterpoint to that is it's never been easy. I mean, I've been
Sure.
like 10 years ago it wasn't easy. I mean, it's always been a sweepstakes business model, right? Meaning there's few winners and a lot of losers, and we're the crazy ones who decided to get into this space and compete in it because it's fun and we're into that. But it's never been that easy. I mean, I always talk to uh who is it that started Merca, great guy. We've had him on a couple times. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he was like, yeah, it was hard back then when it was like 10 years,
Yeah.
9 years ago when Merca entered social casino, right?
Yeah.
So it's always been hard. It is probably harder to your point, and it was easier when Apple, the platform, helped small games, which is good for the ecosystem. I'd love to see that happen again, and I don't
Yep.
think it's going to. I mean, just because we've been sitting around waiting for Apple to do some gaming stuff, and we haven't really seen it. Um,
I'm not sure they've ever been particularly behind the idea of helping the smaller dev, but that's just maybe my bias.
Well, in
But
the
I think to your
beginning
point,
they
Brett,
did when they featured games, right? And
well,
then they would, and I think they were incentivized to do that
they
because
featured, I would argue, they featured games which fitted a certain style of play rather than necessarily a size
Yeah.
of team. But that's my personal view.
I
They
think
were
they did it in the
artisanal.
beginning to make the
Yeah,
overnight garage millionaire, and that
yeah,
that then propagated everyone to jump on the platform and want to be those
yeah.
people, right? I mean, we
There
saw
is some of
that
that.
with,
Yeah.
like, oh, I got 80,000 installs a day. We're doing awesome. And then the second game they launch and they get zero free installs a game, right?
Oh,
So, I mean,
don't
at
get me wrong.
least if
There's some
I was
great
running
people in the
Apple, that
Apple
would make a lot of
teams.
sense to
Yeah.
me because we saw it with Facebook is like you need to have a new game ecosystem to keep the older companies at bay, innovation, pressure. You don't want to have a monopoly on the platform. Like you don't want to
No.
have three companies owning all of the games, right? Because then they have leverage over Apple. We saw that in Facebook with
Yeah.
Zynga for a little while.
That's
We
So
see
fair.
that with the ad
there's
networks today.
incentive. Like Apple probably doesn't care. I mean, they have so much, revenue elsewhere, but I can't imagine there's someone who's going, okay, it's probably going to be good for us if we have some system to showcase really great games that end up doing well, that are from small teams, that put pressure on the larger companies. Larger companies can go acquire those studios. Those studios can then get capital. Like that's just a healthy ecosystem.
But the thing in my head is that the reason for the need for that response is because as we see these bigger games getting bigger and bigger, and the choice getting effectively less and less, because it's either the established game or the AI stop. I'm not saying it will be this, but if that's the case, what we'll actually end up with is a smaller market because we'll see more people rejecting games because they can't find the thing that they want. But what indie games have always done is allowed us to see innovation, opportunity, change. And they may not always have scaled, but what they've often done is they've found spaces that other games haven't found. The question is it easier and cheaper for them to do it? Now we have the AI process. But are they going to reject that process because a lot of indie people are very concerned, understandably, of that process? So I think we're in a very mixed, complicated situation. And I'd probably be more optimistic if we weren't also facing all of that regulatory nonsense that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's actually
All
like
right.
exactly what I was gonna poke at. Like we're talking about trustworthiness of
Yeah.
games and brands and IP being something that's going to be super important. But then like with AI slop or the rise of AI in general, like if you look at a Steam review or Steam reviews for any game that comes out that even like has the slightest smell of AI usage, you'll see a barrage of negative reviews. So like where's that line between player trust and people feeling like they're playing something that they want to support while also trying to keep the costs down for indie developers.
Well,
Yeah.
you've got the example of Clara Obscura Expedition 3, where it was Game of the Year. Everyone was railing about it, but because they hadn't declared some of the art assets were AI generated, they got stripped of one set of the awards. Now, I'm not a fan of the game because I'm slightly dyspraxic and I can't actually get through the tutorial at all, or I couldn't. I'm told they fixed it. I don't know if they have. If they have, fantastic on them. But my point is more, there's an example where we're already having these fractious conversations.
Yeah, and maybe I'd push back a little bit on that perspective, Cody, where so I was back in the day a pioneer in online dating, back from the ICQ random chat days. Like, and
Personally.
at that time, people were like, "Oh my God, you're so disgusting." Online, you're trying to meet women online, and so like the perspective at that time was that online dating was gross, nobody would do it. And I think that's where we are with AI games. I think ultimately players care today. I think they care less on mobile. And I think that in whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now, AI is just, you can't fight the wave. It's like trying to fight the internet. And so I do think my personal belief is that perspectives will change on that. And there's going to be the ones who lean into AI and create compelling experiences with AI fast and cheaply, and those who don't. And I think they're just not going to make it.
And Joseph, I think you've nailed it on that particular point because at the end of the day, I remember launching one of the very earliest mobile Java dating apps back in the day. I can't even remember the name of it, but that app doesn't exist anymore. Long gone. Those early adopters, those early moves, who didn't find the best way to create the best experience, die. And I think that's the where I think in some ways the evolution part we're at. We're at the accelerated excitement stage. We haven't hit the point where we've started to get rational, sustainable, long-term planning using those technologies. But I also think there's an issue with the economics because at the moment the economics of things like voice and artificial actors is not quite there yet, shall we say. It's very much labored towards the tech bro side rather than the creator side. And I think that's going to present a massive economic challenge for us to have a sustainable industry.
But do you think the quality of the games will get higher because of the standard will have to get higher because everyone are using AI and there are a lot of developers out there. So only small amount of games will reach this qualification stage, to be a real good game. Because not everyone will have this place to be the best. There's limited seats out there to be the best. So maybe the quality will get higher.
Yeah, Ariel, I would say like one of the concepts that I push at my company is that you have to signal three things almost immediately, which is quality, a strange attractor, meaning like the uniqueness of it's a Hollywood concept of the strange attractor, or mystery. And so I think increasingly, because of all the noise, because of all the slop, if you don't signal one of those three things immediately or all of those three things, it's going to be, you're going to lose the player's attention. So that is definitely very, very critical. I have another trend, but maybe I should pause if anyone else has.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we've gotten this topic, so.
So speaking of like trying to gain a player's attention, one of the trends that I saw last year is, and I posted about it in Game Maker's newsletter, but like I actually did a study of what were all the successful games, and what were some of the trends or the commonalities between the successful games. And so when you look at, and this is more, it was difficult to see that from a mobile games perspective, but from Steam and PC, it was easier to see. So when you looked at a lot of the games that were successful on Steam last year, it wasn't the $100-200 million, development budget games. It was these small teams anywhere from like 1 to 20 people. And, we all know what a lot of those games were: Lethal, Strange, why am I blanking on the names? So Lethal Company, Schedule One, BattleBit, all these, there's a list of like 6 or 7 that I used as case studies, but they were small teams. And number two, they engaged with the community a lot. And so I think that's going to be an even greater way of being able to break through the noise is if you engage a community and develop that community over time. Those were the ones where you see these small teams, and all of these teams were making like 50, $100 million a year. And so that's the way I think that that's going to be the new meta increasingly in 2026, even for mobile companies, is to try to develop that community as you're developing your game so that you really key in on what are the things that the players are resonating with. And then you have a base to work off of when you're trying to break through the noise.
And that
Uh,
really feeds into the whole thing you were saying about kind of, what is driving success. It actually feeds into something I've just seen in the chat. Marsh Deleuze asking about how do you classify a successful game, and I would argue that I mean, that's such an impossible how long is a piece of string moment, because for me, a successful game is one that has a return on investment, full stop. And when we know that, I'm guessing something like
it,
2% of games
it
break
depends.
even.
It
It's
depends on
probably
who you are.
it depends on who you are. When we talk about deconstruction fund folks, they're going to talk about the $1 billion games more often than not. We're not going to be talking about the indie games that make turnover 500,000. And for those 2-3 students, they're delighted, excited, etc. I think the reason I'm asking the reason I'm responding to that is because I think we have to understand what it is we're trying to achieve with each game. And the big question for me is not just is a game successful, which is get a return on investment, it's can it scale? And I think we'll find that we will start using, and we're already starting to see people changing the way that they operate that scaling by, I think, turning from like the kind of SEO, keywords, UA acquisition to more answers, emotional meaning, and lifestyle choice models, which are about getting player bases that are going to stay and retain over a longer period of time. So I think we can be smarter about it, but I think we are going to have to evolve the way we consider all of the pieces of the puzzle and how we apply the technology, because it's not just about the technology. Games got easier to make when Unity arrived, but okay, maybe not to the same scale and rate that we are seeing with the way that AI is making that possible, but it's just another accelerant of the ability to
Yeah,
take creativity and apply it.
yep. It's basically like an expansion of Roblox. What Roblox has already done is
Yeah,
expanding the funnel of who can be a creator and what is possible in a shorter amount of time.
precisely.
And one thing I should probably add related to this notion of attention economy, signal to noise, and something that I've noticed is that I don't know if any of you guys have played Arc Raiders, but one of the things that you notice in that game is that they've significantly compressed progression completion. And what I mean by that is like, and I think this is going to be increasingly important, is like, it used to be that it's like, okay, unlock this thing after this many steps, after 20 steps, whether you unlock PvP or you get this or that. Now everything's being compressed. Play 5 matches and unlock this map. Do one thing and unlock this progression objective. And so, like historically, for mobile games, there's been the notion, it was kind of popularized by Game of War, short, medium, and long-term objectives into a player. But now there's an increasing focus with all the noise. A lot of the progression completion objectives are being kind of pushed into short-term objectives. Unlocking a map, unlocking X, Y, Z. It's like just do one little thing and you get something. Just do a few little things and you get something, because you can lose your players just like that. And so when you're looking at your funnel and when you're like layering in progression objectives in the short term, not the medium and long term, the short term, a lot of stuff is getting shifted into the short term. And we're going to increasingly see that, I believe, in 2026.
I'm going to challenge that a little bit,
Okay,
because I still
please.
think that the
Yeah,
short,
let's
medium, and
let's mix
long.
it up.
No,
Yeah.
I would say I spent a lot of time thinking about this for my new book. Thinking about the short, medium, and long term goals is still important. But the thing that I've seen missing whenever I've been going into a team and they have some issues because they haven't got a call to action. They haven't got a reason to do the next thing.
Mhm.
And to my mind, it's the reason to do the next thing is what you're describing. I don't think it takes away the need for these longer term loops. In fact, if
For
I
sure.
don't have the visibility of why I'm going to still be playing in 5 years' time, it's inherently because I understand the sense of purpose and experience of this game. I'm probably not going to put the investment in. I mean, I'm exaggerating for effect, but that's one of the things I've noticed, that if you don't have that sense of like, this is what the horizon looks like, as
Yeah.
well as this is what I'm getting. And by the way, that thing I just got was awesome.
Yeah.
That and I'm going to do it again because this is the reason I'm going to act. That is actually, I think, necessary. We can't just look at these things in isolation, in my opinion. We have to look at them as momentum.
Yeah, unfortunately, Oscar, I think I'm going to have to agree with you. And
Damn
basically,
it.
sorry, guys, sorry. I hate boring panels, but like, hopefully it's not too boring for you guys. But I think to the point that you're making, Oscar, about long-term objectives, what we are then seeing, especially as games, if I'm right, if things are getting shifted to the short term, like there aren't enough companies that analyze better your long-term progression and the notion of a progression frontier, right? And so that's the mistake a lot of games have made,
Yeah.
where yeah, you have a great game and you've got great engagement for 2 weeks, and then you see, okay, wait a minute, we went from 20% of our players at progression frontier to 30% to 40%, and then you start to see churn. Now, one of the things we also saw in 2025 was a dramatic increase in Clash Royale's performance. Why? Because there were so many players in Clash Royale that had achieved progression frontier. There was, you didn't have any more shit to progress. So then they added these additional progression vectors and progression systems. And then they like through marketing, like said, hey, everybody come back. We got all this new shit. And then you saw this dramatic spike.
But even then, what we're doing is we're getting designers to think, oh, we're going to have this fixed progression loop, or we're going to have that fixed progression loop. And I would argue we need to think more like soap operas. We need to think more like how we tell stories in ways which are layered and engaging, and one leads to the next and the other. And ideally, adding in optimization. So where the gameplay becomes something which I, as a player, derive because I can achieve those goals by playing around with the way that I play, the system choices I make, and the way that I integrate with other people, and the way that allows me to optimize the game. So I think there's a lot of systems that we can think about, which are not just about linear this, linear that, but more about building this kind of branching, emerging way of thinking that doesn't have to make things more complicated. But again, that's just a different way of thinking about the way
By the
you
way,
do
it
games.
reminds me other games like Royal Match or Kingdom or other kinds of match games or casual games. They have kind of predictive calendar. The player knows more or less what's going to be next. They have like this guess the sequence event, with the potions, and then after 2 days or something, or 3 days, they have these blocks, or they have this peak game. So it's really, really predictive. The player knows what comes after, and sometimes from time to time they get a surprise because of a new mini game. Now they've just launched the merge game, which is super interesting because the affinity between merge and match, it's really relevant. So this is a different kind of strategy. You've got a fixed amount of mini games. You just do it a few days after a few days. Sometimes you add something like a midterm, like the partnerships that they do with the Dragonist, and then they have the album. I mean, everything is so predictive. It's short, medium, long. I'm not surprised, but if I'm surprised, it's in a good way. It's not like a massive content amount, that you cannot
This
find
is something
yourself.
I've been talking about for ages. It's the Columbo moment. It's the TV show Columbo, where we know that we're
You're
watching
probably gonna have to
somebody.
explain that, Oscar. I think that's.
No, no.
I mean, I'm
Honestly,
old
it
too,
is
but
That's
fabulous.
interesting.
No. So in the TV show Columbo, 1970s detective show, where we already know who the murderer is because we're shown right at the beginning, we already know what's coming up, and we know that 5 minutes before the end, it's going to say the immortal line, just one more thing. Now, what's happening in that is that we, as the player, the viewer, we're trying to look for all of the weirdnesses that Columbo picks up on, because our job is not to solve the murder, it's to work out how Columbo solves it. And the game ends when he says just one more thing, because he's just going to explain it. And the whole point is that we have a predictable moment and we have a payoff. And that payoff is something we've either correctly worked out and therefore we're happy because we were right, or we got it wrong and therefore he introduces something we missed and therefore we're happy because we discover something we missed. That Columbo model is incredibly powerful for television, but I also think it's incredibly powerful for thinking about live experiences.
So basically, if the calendar is structured, do you think it's a better approach than, surprising every day? Like, for example, Coin Master, you can open the game
Predictable surprise.
and you get a lot of,
It's the balance.
So,
Like I think
yeah.
both need to exist.
100%. Kenny.
You brought up Clash, Joseph, which I think is an interesting thing that we're seeing, and this is, I think, a theme that I want to add to our report is, I mean, this idea of community, but there's this idea of critical mass almost, particularly with the Supercell games, where you see these players like going to Brawl Stars and then Clash and over here and then over here. It's like, particularly with the younger audience, right? Because they have such access to mobile devices, they're communicating so often. It's to the
They
Columbo
play
moment,
together.
there's like this bottled like system that you get the streamers, you get the YouTubers, somehow you get it to be cool. We didn't talk about one trend that we've highlighted in our report is IP collab. I guess we kind of talked about it a little bit, but like celebrity ads being a big theme in 2025 and integrating that. And I think you guys touched on it, but kind of interesting to see these games get resurrected when they get to that critical mass, and then all of a sudden everyone's playing Clash again, right? Or everyone's playing Brawl Stars or whatever it may be. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think to your point on IP collabs, it's again the same point, signal to noise, attention economy, and IP does work. I remember back in my days working at Sega, we did for Sonic Dash, we did a collaboration with Pac-Man where you could play as Pac-Man in Sonic Dash and Dow like doubled. It was crazy. So I do think those things work. But yeah, I've
By
got
the
more
way,
trends, but I'll
what
I
about
think
web
what you said
stores? We
about-
didn't talk about it. It's a little
yeah. Oh,
nitty-gritty,
hey,
but
so I
mean,
actually yeah. Let me talk about that. So like, and I think you guys did a good job. So just to shout you guys out, Brett, in terms of your coverage of web shops, it was certainly a trend that started about 2 years ago. It was accelerating last year. And I think like the methodologies and the specific ways of driving players to web shops started to pick up last year. And I think you guys correctly called that out at Liquid and Grit. And I think you guys did a great job of characterizing the various approaches. But I would say the trend will shift a little bit this year is my prediction, which is to say that in this new world that I've alluded to, and as an AI maximalist, as software goes to zero, I think, and I showed you that website I vibe coded in 2.5 days, but why, like, I actually think that we're gonna start to see small, like mid to smaller size studios think, okay, why am I paying 10% or whatever percentage you are to a web shop vendor when the cost of software is trending to zero? So I think that what we're going to start to see this year, sorry if you have any of those sponsors, Brett, sorry about that, but like, I do think we're going to see a lot of smaller studios just say, hey, you know what? I can just vibe code this shit.
I don't know.
trend for
I
us this year is no
suspect.
more sponsors, by the way.
Sorry?
Trend for us this year is no more
Oh,
sponsors.
okay.
Uh,
By the
Okay,
way,
then-
I'm
Playtika
not
do it
convinced.
in-house,
So
Okay.
yeah, like dealing, yeah, don't, yeah,
I'm not
don't
convinced.
get
The
me
reason I'm not
started.
convinced on the stores front is because retailing is a skill. Retailing effectively, yes, you're going to get some of that happening, but there's a combination of critical mass needed to have enough
Yeah.
people going to that space, and effective retail understanding. And most
But
in-game.
Oscar, okay, so now let me disagree with you because I think the
Yeah, go
point
for
you're
it.
making is exactly
Yeah.
right. Retail is
Yeah.
a skill, and I think that it's like, why does Epic have so many better features in Unreal than Unity? Because they're also game developers. I think it's the game studios that don't
Let's
want
talk
to
about that
work off the
offline.
templates.
I have views.
But I think it's like the game developers who are sophisticated, who understand their audience, who understand how to optimize and how to because I think on the vendor side, like so many vendors are okay, and you don't have any more sponsors. Okay, good. So many vendors do not know how to optimize. How do they
Yeah.
operate? They ask the game studios, what should we put into our game? What feature do you guys are you guys looking for? But if you're a studio and you know your shit, you're going to be able to build a more optimized, customized web shop flow and experience for your players than working off of one of their templates.
But it's going to
Well,
be the
and
bigger
also it's
ones that
dude, it
can
also
do
it's the
that.
speed. It's the speed at
Yeah.
which like gaming just operates. Like gaming is
Yeah.
like, just the speed of it. And then you get these like
But
SaaS
remember, you're
suppliers that are
where
going
I
at
do
like a
agree.
snail's pace. So your point, Joseph
Yeah.
Kim, it's like the game developers just are going to get frustrated. That's what was happening with us. Is like
Yeah,
we're getting our sponsorship reviewed and it's taking 3 months to get it back,
yeah,
and we're like we're already on to the freaking seventh content that we could have put out, and it's like
yeah.
what are we doing here? So it's like not even worth it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Okay.
this is deep enough into
Yeah,
the
so it's
round
like
table I could say it, but like, and we're a fast operating company. Like again, we run our shop like a gaming shop, right? That's our
right. So when
so
you're like operating web shop and you're asking your web shop vendor, I won't call out specific people, but it's like, hey dude, where's this feature I asked for? And you're not Scopely, so they're not going to put that feature in for you, and Scopely won't use you anyway because they're so big and they want to keep their margin. Then it's like, fuck it, I'm just going to build it on my own.
But we're talking about the top 20% of teams that can take advantage of what you're describing, I would
Those are the
argue.
only ones that
I
are going
don't
to
know about
survive.
that argument, yeah, Oscar, because small teams are like just like so fast and they have no bureaucracy, so they want to
They're
do everything
fast, but
themselves.
they're not retailers. They're fast at making games. They're fast at doing
Yeah.
some things. I genuinely think that the risk of that for a lot of people is, look, it's hard enough to get a small team to put an API in.
But with
Anything that
AI, that's
distracts from the
automatic
main
now.
gig.
Yeah, with one
Yeah,
person
but you know what I'm
Claude,
I
saying.
don't
integrate
know.
post hoc for me
Yeah,
now.
it's
Beep.
like
Yeah,
Okay, done. What else
yeah,
do you need?
yeah,
I'm
versus
still
like
not
Obviously,
convinced.
go talk to a sales guy and then get the BD guy and then get the legal document and then, like you're gonna if you're a
No,
small shop, you're like I might as
I
well
buy
just
that
build this.
argument. Yeah.
Yeah, because the companies are built like SaaS. I mean, not even they're VC backed companies, right? They have like five BD guys, three marketers, seven salespeople, and one developer, right? So
But
it's
we
just not
still
like
need
it's not
that
in their defense. It's
visibility.
it's
I would add
they're
to
not
that,
built.
because Playtika do it internally. We don't use
Yeah.
any external
Yeah.
vendor, but obviously I cannot discuss all of the operations. But
Why not?
in general, there are a lot of things, of course, but you've got a lot of things to consider. It's the developers. You have to deal with the processing of the credit card.
Yeah,
There
that's
are some
hard.
Visa and Mastercard, and you got PayPal, and you got a lot of others to deal with, and you've got the API, and there are a lot of things to deal with beyond the developing the web shop itself. So this is something that you have to consider before you reach to do this by your own. But it doesn't mean that this development with AI will not be effective. But be very effective. Just to remember
Yeah. But the
everything that
pressure on the
encompasses it.
product side and the marketing is making it so that it's so much more incentivized for game developers to go find margins in these other places too, right? Like DT
Absolutely.
web shops and partnerships and cost and whatever, right? I mean, like I often said that, and I hated saying it when we were going through the ATT thing, which was so tough on so many people, and it was tough on us. Was like, yeah, but we were kind of overly reliant on just sending out, and Oscar, I think this was your original point, sending out an ad for $1, getting $1.25 back, knowing exactly how much
Yeah.
we got, right? Like we got just like so married to that we forgot about
Yeah.
taking risks and optimizing for operations and operations
100%.
and other things, you know? And
We should
so there's
also
just a
add that your
lot of,
store is one of those channels as well.
Mhm.
You know, we talked
yeah,
back
it's
in the
just
day about,
everything that you're
yeah,
looking at, right? You're looking at community, you're looking at
yeah,
brand, you're looking
Yep.
at
360
price,
CRM. Mhm.
DTC,
100%.
cost, all these other really interesting places. I actually like, I mean, Liquid and Grid is a supplier, obviously, but there was a really great Harvard Business Review article a long time ago that I based a lot of the stuff that we did off of, which they analyzed innovative companies, and what their takeaway was is that product is not as much of the innovation in a lot of companies that people think, right? Like people really like gravitate towards that, right? Apple is, you know, but if you go and look at like Dell and at the time Zappos and things like that, there's innovation on customer intimacy. There's innovation on operations in the case of Dell. There's and you see a lot of that. There's pricing innovation. There's all this other thing. So gaming companies are just amazingly built, right? So it's kind of fun to see them go into these other areas. Go, oh, okay, well, we could tackle this, right? We could tackle AI. We could tackle DTC eventually or whatever it is. So it's kind of exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we
Um,
have time for a final trend,
yeah.
or we are out
Yeah,
of
go
time?
for it. It's 10:01. Oh my God. Okay. Well, you got the floor because for the last trend, it better be the best one. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
You got
okay.
the
So it
trend. You
has
got
to
the
be.
No
last
pressure.
call out trend, and then we'll stop. Go for it.
Um, I was talking about the Asian developers, like Century Games, like Microfun, like those developers that brought really high quality games to the Western markets. And I think it's amazing. We see it like in Gossip Harbor, for example. We see it in Last War Survival. We see it all around basically. And I think it's going to grow during 2026. There are some advantages because larger developers teams, larger amount of money to spend in marketing. Those are things that are challenging for other developers in the West. But yeah, I think we're going to see more and more games coming from Asian developers in the tier one like West markets. This is what I think, and this is
Yeah,
what I noticed this year. And it's amazing
that's
because
fair.
they do a great job, but the opposite way, like, when you come from the West, for example, from the US, and you try to develop a game that will suit China, for example, it's hard because there's the culture is different. Players are used to different
Hard's an
things,
understatement.
and this is only one way now. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting if we see the vice versa. But I think this is one of the trends of 25, and also will be in 26.
Yeah, I've got two comments on your trend, Ariel, which is one, I think the thing that was the most interesting about a lot of the Asian developers, especially the Forex guys, is a trend that actually, again, I want to shout you guys out, Brett. Good job on Liquid and Grit, but the hybridization of game modes. And we already, I think we've already discussed to death like that, the trend of taking a playable ad and the gameplay that's featured there and integrating that where you have initial game mode that basically reflects what marketing could pull players into, and then you switch to 4X later, and that has been a massive winning strategy over the last 2 years. But I do think that what we are now seeing is that at least for mobile, I don't know about PC, but at least for mobile, the existence of different game modes or switching from one mode to another is probably there. And to the point about Asian game developers, one of the things that, because I actually used to work at Fun Plus, which was the kind of precursor to Century, and like a couple of the Fun Plus guys are the ones who led Century. But like one of the things that the CEO of Fun Plus once told me, so Andy Zong, is that he's like, I don't care about costs. The only thing I care about is revenue. And I think the thing that we may see with AI, and as we've seen with the kind of demise, decline, and just the blowing up of Western game studios, is that I do think AI makes Western game development a lot more viable. And as an American citizen, and as somebody who cares about Western game studios, I do hope that AI now kind of helps make Western game studios more competitive relative to Asia, because then we can't just use cost as a major source of competitive advantage. I'm hoping that that's the case.
I think you've
Awesome.
got a point.
Well,
One
we
thing I
could
just
probably
can I
talk
just
all day
oh, yeah.
about this, Oscar.
I was just going to add one
Um,
last thing about
uh,
one of the we talked about live ops games. The issue there is that we're now starting to see tracking costs in maintaining your live ops is now starting to become more important, but that's a wider question.
yeah, yeah. Awesome stuff, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. This will be posted, and I really appreciate you jumping on. It's super interesting. I learned a ton. And yeah, thanks for being on here.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. It was
Thanks.
great to be
Pleasure,
here.
guys. That was very great fun.